40 years has now passed since The Empire Strikes Back has come out. The greatest Star Wars film of all time. I mean, it still holds that title. It still is the best Star Wars film to date. Now, I know you're going to have some people in the comments who are saying, actually, I think The Last Jedi is better, or, Revenge of the Sith is arguably the best Star Wars film ever. And I let some of you kids think what you think and act like you know what you're talking about when it comes to film or Star Wars. Whenever you say something insulting, like any other movie in the Star Wars franchise is better than Empire Strikes Back. 1980, Irvin Kershner, Gary Kurtz, Lawrence Kasdan, and George Lucas. Empire Strikes Back is the one film, at least up until George Lucas had sold the franchise. You guys are going to remember, before Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, this was the one Star Wars film that he had the least amount of involvement with. So a lot of fans were looking at this film as an example and saying, hey, maybe the franchise would do better if someone didn't direct it named George Lucas, because a lot of people were upset with what he had done with the prequels because he wrote and directed all three of them. A lot of people assumed maybe if someone else came in and wrote or directed one of the Star Wars films, we'd get better results. And we used history as examples. We looked at the past and said, Episode 1, A New Hope, had George Lucas. And he was writing and directing it, and it came out great. But what happened after that? Episode 2, which became Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, was amazing. It was perfect. It was the best sequel of all time. Because instead of just being the simple story like A New Hope was, like the original Star Wars was, this actually made you care a lot more about the characters. It was a lovey-dovey kind of story without all the smooching and kissing between Han and Leia. It felt real. It felt like characters you would actually know and situations you would actually see in the real world where these two people who don't really like each other end up falling in love. Luke Skywalker, he asked, 100-something questions throughout the original trilogy? Which may seem like a small number, but when you're asking 100-something questions and about 50 of them come from Empire Strikes Back, that does two things. It informs Luke on the story and what's going to happen in the future for him and kind of the mythology of the Force and everything, but it also informs us, the audience. During The Empire Strikes Back, when Luke is training, he asks a lot of questions to Yoda. Is the dark side stronger? What's in that cave? All these things, all these questions about the dark side and Vader and the Emperor, and just everything about the Force and about life. We learn about these things from Yoda, and it makes The Empire Strikes Back a very powerful and emotional movie. And there's a reason there's a lot of quotable moments from that. Do or do not, there is no try. I am your father, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder. There's so many memorable quotes from Empire Strikes Back because it was a very well written and made movie. The story came by a guy named George Lucas, worked alongside with people like Gary Kurtz, Lawrence Kasdan, Irvin Kershner. However, George wasn't as involved with this film because he was busy producing. He was busy producing this film because there was a limit on the budget they had at the time. This film almost, I don't think you guys realize, if Empire Strikes Back did not do the numbers it made in the box office, we would not have gotten the rest of the Star Wars franchise. The bank, when they were making this is where the first Lucasfilm president, I know a lot of you are going to be very ignorant to some of this knowledge Star Wars only is about to drop on you, but the very first Lucasfilm president, Charles Weber, is one of the main reasons Empire Strikes Back came out the way it did, is because the bank pulled the loan that they gave Lucasfilm. Lucas didn't want people at Fox messing with his film, having the rights to his film, and so he was in a very weird situation of producing this film, saying, I don't have time to direct and write this and do all that. I'm going to let Irvin Kershner do it. This is a guy that used to teach at USC that I attended. I know him. He's credible. He's a good director. I'm going to let him deal with it. And same with Gary Kurtz, because Gary Kurtz was the producer, the guy to kind of get things done himself. So Lucas is out there financing the movie, dealing with all that stuff, and the bank pulls a loan. Charles Weber has to come in and save the day. The first Lucasfilm president. God bless you, Charles Weber. You did a great job. Empire was a success. That, of course, led into the third one. But Empire left a precedent in the Star Wars universe of it was apparent that George Lucas is not needed on set to make a good Star Wars film. Now, what's weird about that is that in hindsight, we look at something like the sequel trilogy. We look at the Disney Star Wars films. And we say, well, George wasn't that involved in any of them. I mean, he showed up to a set on a few of them, sure, from time to time, but his involvement was not like it was on Empire, where Empire actually had a say in the story and where things went. And so now that we have history as our teacher, now that I can look at the Star Wars film that Lucas was least involved with between episodes 1 through 6, and the Star Wars films that he wasn't involved with basically at all between episodes 7 through 9 and then the spin-off films, I have to say, I like The Empire Strikes Back still a lot better, and maybe Star Wars does need that Lucas touch. But it also needs something that I think a lot of prequel fans forget. It needs to be able to tell George Lucas no. Irvin Kershner, director for Empire Strikes Back, made the best Star Wars film, and one of the reasons he made it is because he was one of the only directors, and so far the only director in history to look at George Lucas and tell him, no, you are wrong. And he was. There were some things Lucas got wrong about Empire Strikes Back. He does not like the line when Han Solo says, "I know," to Leia. And in the script that George Lucas kind of helped put in said, I love you too, and then Han Solo goes in the carbonite freeze. But Han Solo, Harrison Ford, changed it and said, I know. George didn't like it. I mean, are you going to tell me he's right? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I think he's wrong. And this is the thing that Irvin did completely different than George. George isn't known for the characters, the emotion, the dialogue. He's there for the story, the effects, the meaning, the lessons that we take away in building that world. Someone like Irvin comes in and he brings the characters. He brings the emotion, the tension to the scene. He does a lot of master shots that Lucas wasn't a big fan of at the time. He was really upset with Gary Kurtz and Irvin after this film because of how over budget it went. And this is one of the big downfalls, in my opinion, of the Lucasfilm empire, is that he got rid of Gary Kurtz after Empire Strikes Back because of how Gary Kurtz handled himself with A New Hope and Empire. Lucas felt like he almost, I would say at least when it came to the first film, let the British crew kind of walk over him. But that's a Lucas thing. That wasn't much of a Kurtz thing. There's a lot of drama that happened between those two guys. I'm just saying The Empire Strikes Back really shows you the full potential of what Star Wars could and should be. You have Gary Kurtz producing it, having influence on the story, Lawrence Kasdan coming in to write the screenplay alongside George Lucas, and then a director like Irvin Kershner working on it. And all four of these guys would work together and had that harmony between each other. They could vibe off each other, they could tell each other yes, no, and you know, shoot their shots on certain ideas, but eventually we got a great story. Despite all the struggles that went into it, we got a great story and a great film, and a film that people still try to replicate to this day. I remember when the Hobbit films were coming out. They came out with the second one. I think it was called Desolation of Smaug or something like that. Not a good film. But I remember them saying in some of the articles, this is supposed to be the Empire Strikes Back of the trilogy. They always want to do that with the middle film in every trilogy we have now. No matter what franchise it is, The Empire Strikes Back still remains the best sequel of all time. It ended on a very dark but yet happy note of there's still some hope there. Last Jedi tried to do a little bit of the same thing at the end where it's like, oh, there's a little hope. Well, no, at the end of The Last Jedi, I didn't care what happened after this. I didn't care what happened next in the story. I cared what happened after Empire. Luke's father is Darth Vader? Is that a lie? Are you lying to me, or is this what really happened? What happens next? Is Han Solo alive? He's in carbonite freeze. Are they going to get him back from Jabba's palace? We did not know what would happen next in the story, but we wanted to know. That's what Empire Strikes Back did. It made you want to know more. And it's such a fantastic film. And I just have to say, looking back at it 40 years later, I still miss Gary Kurtz. I still miss Lawrence Kasdan, Irvin Kershner, teaming up with someone like George Lucas. I wish we could get something like that again. I wish the people making Star Wars now could look at what they have and say, okay, we're not doing this with George, but let's look at the one that did it without George. Let's look at Empire and try to do something close along the lines of that. It's hard to copy perfection, and Empire Strikes Back truly is a perfect movie, in my opinion. There's one scene that I would change, and that's Luke and Leia kissing. But it also shows you that everything was planned out, and sometimes it doesn't always need to be planned out. Believe it or not, what makes that film what that film is Luke and Leia kissing. Alderaan, it's kind of like the Mississippi of the galaxy, if you will. But enough of my rants on The Empire Strikes Back. It's been 40 years. I just wanted to remind you all why I love that film so much and why I think you should look at it, rewatch it, and take away some meaning from it. And look at that film and say, this is what Star Wars should and could be. How do we get it back to that point? I think Empire Strikes Back is always going to be the height of Star Wars storytelling. And there's not a better film than the Star Wars franchise. I may like films like Return of the Jedi maybe a little better than I do Empire Strikes Back. There are films that I probably like and enjoy more than Empire Strikes Back. But it's an irrefutable fact that it is the best Star Wars film to date. There's a difference between a film and a movie, by the way, guys. You got to find the difference between the two. Start reading some film books, and you'll realize this is a perfect film. This is the best film in the Star Wars franchise. But maybe I'm biased. I was there, 1980, May 21st. Oh yeah, you best believe Star Wars Only was there with the crowd watching Empire Strikes Back. Of course I'm lying. I'm just nostalgic for a time I was never a part of. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Irvin Kershner directed, George Lucas, Larry Kasdan writing, and my boy, the man, the myth, the legend, Gary Kurtz producing. I miss them all dearly. Tell me your thoughts below. I'm Star Wars Only. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys enjoyed The Empire Strikes Back. And remember what made Star Wars Star Wars. I'll see y'all next time, and may the Force be with you. Always.